I'm so excited for today's episode. We are diving into school age. We are going to look at 5 activities that are very powerful in producing optimal gains, and they address 5 different developmental domains. This is an episode you cannot miss if you work with school age children, or even if you just work with a couple of school age children. I know a lot of preschool SLPs, they'll pick up over the summer maybe 2 or 3 school age children, and they're not really sure what to do. They go into the standard business as usual, your mama's therapy type of practice, which really doesn't produce results. I'm going to share with you today 5 different activities that produce big results at elementary age. I'm so excited for this episode. Now, I'm going to be honest, I work with ages 2 to 6 years. I am a preschool SLP through and through. So how is it that I feel that I can give suggestions at the school age? And that's because in my SIS membership, I would say half of my members currently in the SIS membership that receive activities weekly are elementary age speech language pathologists. So I get so much feedback with them. I'm always conversing with them. We're always talking about strategy. We're always talking about activities. We're always troubleshooting. So I get a lot of feedback from the elementary age. I also read a lot of research at elementary age. I find that there's much more research for elementary age speech language therapy than there is for preschool age, actually. So I get a lot of the research from the elementary age, and I translate it into preschool practice if we don't have anything available at the preschool practice. I'm very transparent about that. If I'm sharing research from the elementary age, I'm telling you it's simply because we don't have the random controlled trials at the preschool age. So we're going to have to do the best with what we have. Let's dive in to these 5 powerful activities. These are going to move the needle. These are activities that are going to produce optimal gains for your kiddos. So you might want to open a Google Doc, take notes. This is what you're going to want to do. Try these 5 activities, see what happens. Make sure to shoot me an email, and I want to hear your success stories. They keep me going at what I do. Number 1 is the speech. If you want to improve speech, it's as simple as that. You want to improve the target. The target is kind of like the food. The food you eat determines how healthy you're going to be. No amount of exercise is going to undo a bad diet, right? The treatment target, I would say, is about 80% of the gains. When it comes to that speech target, this is what you're going to want. You're going to want 3-element clusters, and you're going to want complex 2-element clusters. So you're going to want that to be placed in a paragraph format. Now, I'm only going to talk about speech here when it comes to the paragraph, but the paragraph kind of treats everything all at once. But when it comes to the speech, the paragraph is going to improve the child's verbal working memory. So that means when they produce those clusters, they're going to more be able to remember how to produce the snake sound if you're doing an SKR blend, say, so that's and keeping the tongue back in the K, and then keeping those hungry dog teeth for that R, so that the lips are not rounded. So when you have to remember these 3 processes, it's going to be easier if your verbal working memory has improved. And the verbal working memory has improved because you're saying a paragraph and not a single word. Another reason the paragraph is so powerful is that speech is not a discrete motor act. So when we look at speech, it's kind of like swinging a golf club. It's continuous in nature. So the further your speech therapy is away from actual speech, the lower the gains that you're going to get. For instance, people used to do oral motor therapy, where they would have the child blow a cotton ball across a table, and they would think that was going to help them talk more clearly. Well, now we know that's really not the case at all, right? So what we are looking at when it comes to that speech, though, is we're looking at when we have it close to the actual speech, what we're improving. So when we have the child speaking in continuous form and speaking accurately in a continuous format, which is what speech is, you're going to get better generalization. So whatever you do, if you're training for a sport, for instance, and you're like, I'm doing bicep curls and I'm training for the marathon, that's not going to help the marathon, because the further you are away from the actual thing that you want to improve, the lower the gains. When we're doing a consonant vowels or sounds in isolation or say words, that is not like speech. So that's going to have less of a likelihood to improve actual speech. The paragraph also is more like speech in that it's continuous in nature. Lastly, it's also going to be more like speech in that you have those complex motor movements in which you're combining a lot of things all at once. You're combining your ideation, remembering what are you going to say, thinking and pre-planning that out. Then you're going to think about the planning. How are you going to articulate in a continuous fashion to get this long paragraph out? And then you have the programming and the execution. So this is like conversation in which you're thinking about what you're going to say. You're planning how are you going to move your mouth in that manner. You're programming it. So you're deciding what muscles you're going to be using and you're executing. So the paragraph, when you move to that paragraph level, you're going to find that you're going to get much greater gains in speech. This is something I researched in a random controlled trial manner, had substantial gains, had statistical significance. I've been there, done that. You can do that with your own kiddos and see if you're finding what I'm finding. I'm going to bet my money that you will. Now, so you're going to do that in a paragraph format instead of a single word or a sentence type of format, your mama's business as usual therapy. The second thing you're going to do is you're going to use those 3-element clusters, and you're going to use those complex clusters that combine an obstruent sound, such as the S. The S blends I found to be the most powerful. I've looked at all of them, and I've researched all of them experimentally. You're going to want to combine that with something that's known as a sonorant sound. So the sonorants we're thinking of are the L's, the R's, and the W's. Now think about that. You're probably like, SR, what blend is SR? No, we're going for the 3-element blend. SKR, STR, SPR. And you're probably thinking, so then we can have SL, slide, for instance, SW, swap. But even better if you get it in a 3-element blend. Also, when it comes to those paragraphs, you want to focus on those R's. My research has shown that if you work on the R's, you will get the L's for free. It's about making the best use of that 30 to 45 minutes a week that you have. So number one is the speech paragraph. That is what I would do at the elementary age. If you haven't done it yet, give it a try. I think you're going to be delighted at the gains that you're going to make. So let's look at number 2, language. So for language, what I have found is if I work on that how question, in which the child is responding in a story format, using first, next, then, lastly, because, what happens is I get the who questions, the what questions, the where questions, the why questions, the yes, no questions. Because of that cascading impact, I'm going to get those for free. So if I'm working at the elementary level, I'm going to focus on how do we, so if we're going to discuss a process, I like my movement activities. How do we play this game? And the child explains the multiple step movements. Then I could take it up a level. How are we going to play this game? Where they describe it in future tense. Or I can take it up a level by saying, how did we play the game? In which they describe it in past tense. So of course I have these ideas from my SIS members that work with older elementary age children. And they say, after we complete the task-oriented movement activity, I say, let's go through the steps. How did we? And they have to use the past tense verbs, the past tense irregular verbs. Or they say, before we engage in the activity, I want them to say how we are going to, and using those future verbs to describe the actions that they're going to do. So that is one thing. Another thing that you can do at the elementary level. So first, we covered the domain of speech. I would go for the paragraph, go for those 3-element clusters and those complex 2-element clusters. Number 2, for the language, we're going to go for how. How do you? how did you, and how will you? And they describe a multiple step process. Number 3, when it comes to literacy and comprehension, we're going to go for identifying the elements of the story, because knowing the elements of the story, this is called a cognitive approach to literacy. And that's where you know the kind of the schemata, you know how the things go, you have the expectation, and that frees you up to focus on comprehending actually what is happening. So you know that, okay, first we're going to have a character, and then there's going to be a setting. And then after that, there's going to be a problem or some kind of initiating event. Like, I know what to expect, so I can really free up to absorb the story. It provides that nice, I think of it as a ladder that kind of puts everything in place neatly so that you can pay attention to what's going on. And then after that, we can take those elements of the story and we can use that when it comes to the story retelling. Okay, who was the character? Okay, great. What was the setting? We can go through all of those steps as a guide. And then lastly, when the child is telling their own stories and making up their own story, we could say, well, let's go ahead and make up a story about someone who lives on a farm. And then we're going to say, okay, first we need to come up with a character. Who's going to be the character? Maybe they'll say the farmer, okay? And then we have the setting, and that gives them a guide to create their own story. So when it comes to language, I'm actually going to use a literacy activity, and that is that identifying the elements of the story, which will provide that nice skeleton for us. And then I also want to add into that story retelling and then storytelling, to independently generating stories at a higher level. This is going to give you the most bang for your buck, not only in improving literacy comprehension, but also improving language comprehension and language expression. So what I like to do when it comes to putting my eggs in a basket, and you know how expensive eggs are today. These are golden eggs that we have. I like to put them all in the baskets that are going to pay off. And this is a basket that's going to pay off not only in terms of literacy, but also in terms of language comprehension and language expression. So this will help the child read, write, speak, understand. You're going to get a lot for this. Put your eggs in this basket at the elementary age and also in the preschool age. Let's go on to the next one. Executive function. Now, the research indicates that even if the child has a distortion, like it's an R distortion or a distorted S, a lateralized or frontal S, these children, even these children with the mild speech distortions, are more likely to have executive function difficulties. So when you have children that have also phonological processes, even more likely to have executive function difficulties. Children that have motor speech disorders, such as childhood apraxia of speech, even more likely to have executive function difficulties. And we know that children with language delays are more likely to have executive function diction difficulties. So essentially, every single child on your caseload is at a statistically significant higher likelihood to have executive function difficulties. So you want to embed this in the activities, which is what I focus on in the SIS membership. And that's why, as I talked about before, we're going to, at an early age and all the way through elementary school, have them identify what is the problem? What is your plan? What actions are you going to take? And what is the consequence going to be? So you can take this and you can use this and create a social story for any issue that you're having with any child. And at the elementary age, you can have the child write the social story. This is gold. This is one of those, take those golden eggs, those really expensive eggs, and put them in this basket, because you're going to find executive function difficulties is something that is pervasive for most of the children on your caseload. If you embed this into the activities like I do in my SIS membership, then you're going to be treating the whole child. And executive function difficulties, this is something that's going to affect the child academically, socially, vocationally, in their relationships. This is something that really matters. This is a needle mover at the preschool age, at the elementary age. All of these activities that I'm sharing with you, you can work them at the preschool age with more prompting. You can work at them with the elementary school age with less prompting and with the child doing more of the generating. You're passing on the baton at the elementary age, and the child is the teacher now, and you're taking more of a passive role as a student. You're just giving them those scaffolds so that they can fly, and then you're removing the support. Now we're looking at the last one, which is decoding. So for decoding, if you think about Scarborough's reading rope, she talks about the language, the literacy comprehension as being one strand, and then also that fluency in decoding, which has to do with sight words, which has to do with print knowledge, which has to do with phonemic awareness, that you need both of these to be mastered in order to become a highly skilled reader, in which reading can become an automatic process. So with decoding, I'm going to share with you the most powerful, according to the research, phonemic activity that you can do. And that is identifying, these are always in my SIS membership pretty much every single week for this reason, the beginning and ending sound of a word. And the reason for that is that you're going to light that brain up like a light bulb. And that's because you're working the areas of the brain that are visual processing. You're seeing the letters, the print letters in the beginning, the middle, the end. Then there's that phonemic awareness, auditory processing, in which you're identifying what is the beginning sound, what is the ending sound of that word. So it takes this visualization, it takes this auditory processing, it takes this print knowledge. So in the sense of decoding this developmental domain, when you work on a challenging task like this, that requires so much going on all at once, you're going to have a cascading impact in which all of these other phonemic awareness skills are going to naturally develop, such as the letter recognition, the phonemic awareness, the sound to letter correspondence, segmentation of a word, in that it has a beginning sound, and then it has an ending sound and a middle sound, and identifying where they are in that word, which really helps with the visual processing that many children with dyslexia struggle with. So you are getting a lot of bang for your buck by working on this activity. And the research indicates that this specific phonemic activity, phonemic awareness activity, is very powerful in that it is already improving those other earlier domains by working at this level. So when you look at all that we share today, there's 5 domains for my SIS membership that I focus on. What's neat about them is you can work with them at the less prompts, with the child generating more of the language, with the child taking charge more in the activity, and you giving less support. Instead, you're giving them the scaffold so that they can go and start creating themselves and be the creator. And you're taking on the role as a student, and the child becomes the teacher. When you're looking at the preschool level, you still want that internal locus of control, but you're going to start with a maximum level of prompting. Now, I really believe that we need to ask the question, not if a child can do something, but how can a child do something? And that's where your cues come into place. The larger your toolbox, the better off that you're going to be. So at the preschool level, if a child isn't getting something, I don't blame the child. I say, what do I need to be doing differently? And that is how you build your toolbox. Always DSD, do something different. The child can always do it. Children are always going to do what they're capable of doing. What you need to be able to do is you need to provide them the tools so that they're able to thrive. And the tools come from your toolbox. So in closing, some of the people I've worked with have been like, well, you don't do these activities with children with autism though, right? You do these activities with the children that have mild speech and language impairments, right? And I'm like, no, no, no. I do these activities with all of the children on my caseload, and I use a maximum level of cueing. Now, of course, when I first start working with some children, we're not here yet. I meet the children where they are. If you're in the sensory stage, I might be pulling you in a wagon and singing songs, and you're using an augmented communication device to request go in the wagon and some other singing and some other sensory delights. And then we're going to move on to this cause effect toys. And then we're going to move on to these task-oriented movement activities. We're going to evolve over time with me providing scaffolds and challenging the child at their challenge point all throughout. But what you see here is where we're headed. These activities is where we're headed. And when you get into these activities, like the children with autism saying the complex speech paragraph, you're going to be amazed at the gains. And when you see the children with autism answering the how do we play the game questions, and then they're starting to not only tell you the script that they've memorized, but then they're starting to use their own language and describe multiple step processes. This is what happens because challenge creates change. And when we give the children with autism the top shelf intervention, which is what I'm sharing with you today, what's going to happen is these children take off. So never ask the question, can this child do that? Always ask, how? How can this child do that? And then you're going to make the progress. You're going to make progress. The child's going to make progress because you're always going to be doing something different. And that's what growing looks like. And as you grow, the children will grow. Well, I want you to take all of this information, and if you haven't checked out the SIS membership yet, I'd love to see you at the drawing board alongside me, growing with me, in the trenches with me, rolling up your sleeves for real, doing the work. Join for a month, you know what I mean, and get the treatment targets. And if you don't like it, you just unsubscribe. It's totally worth it for the treatment targets. But I really want you to grow and benefit from that and all that it offers. So make sure to check out the SIS membership if you haven't yet. You won't be disappointed. You will be, I think, impressed or amazed even at the gains your students are going to make. And you're going to be happier and your students are going to be happier. For me personally, being someone with ADHD, I'm a SIS member. What's so beneficial for me is having two very educationally rich activities all set and ready, having my parent home practice all set and ready to send out. And all I need to do is be present. And that is so important because that is when the magic happens. So for me, having ADHD, having right in front of me, everything is all set and ready to go, means that all I need to do is focus all of my energy on the little ones right in front of me, or the little one right in front of me. And what happens when you do that is the children blossom. It's about being present. It's about sensitively responding on a moment-to-moment basis. It's about dynamically cueing on a moment-to-moment basis. It's about being all in and what happens when we're all in. So I wasn't able to be all in before, but I am with the SIS membership because I have at my fingertips two engaging, highly effective, educationally rich activities that treat the whole child. All I have to do is focus on the child, and that is when the magic happens. So dig up those sleeves and do what you do best, which is to make the world a better place, one child at a time. You will always be first